Don Mazzella here for Small Business Digest. We have with us someone who's going to perhaps help us better understand this logistic nightmare that everybody tells us about and we're all scared of, but don't understand. So with that, we welcome Bill Wappler from Sergere to our program. Bill, glad to have you on the program today.
Thank you. I'm very glad to join you.
Okay, Bill, as we ask all our guests, tell us first a little bit about yourself personally, then a little bit about your company, and finally a website before we do anything else.
Of course, it's a short story, actually. I'm an Illinois boy, born and raised, went to schools in Illinois and finished at Northwestern. Was then brought into very large companies to help them build small targeted new divisions. Many of us call those skunk works. So I performed that for companies like Honeywell, ITT, Caterpillar Division, some of those companies that we all recognize. As I was performing those duties, I became very deeply involved with technology and then using technology as a service. Through that point in time, I accepted a challenge of becoming a president to a software company in California. And that was a company that was primarily in packaging and doing business with folks, again, that we all know, International Paper, Smurfit Stone, folks like that. We were doing quite well. About 80% of the world's packaging industry was working with our software. But I started to hear more and more conversation about supply chain. At that point, it was really very new. People didn't understand it, but International Paper came to me and wanted to start understanding more about what the small businesses that they were supplying were seeing from their customers. How could they better react? What could IP do to help them prepare for business fluctuations? And in fact, what really we know today to be supply chain was what they were asking for. So I went to our board of directors and asked that we turn the ship a little bit and get heavily involved in supply chain. Although they appreciated the conversation, they really wanted to stick to their knitting, and I asked that I be allowed to go build that capacity on my own. So I launched Sergere. That was in 2004, and I found the 5 brightest people in the world that I could at the time, that were well indoctrinated, if you will, in the expertise of supply chain. So we came out. Our first client was the Timken Company. We moved to Alcoa, then Best Buy, then Ford. And we found that not only was the topic of interest, but people were really yearning to get their hands around it. So at that point in time, we were growing pretty quickly, and Whirlpool came to us and asked us to move all of their inbound parts to reusable containers, which we did. And then they asked that in order to track them, we go back into the software business. So that's really what created Sergere Part 2. We once again moved from consulting to software, and we started tracking reusable containers. And that was, I think, not only a milestone event, but the recreation of our company. And we were actually doing a pretty darn good job. And then all of a sudden, Johnson Controls came knocking at the door and asked that we extend beyond software into what we now all call IoT, or data collection devices. And they, with us, embarked on a new journey of how to start seeing all of the movement of containers within their enterprise. And so we started working with RFID. That was back in the later parts of 2012, 2014. And we're not prescient and we're not brilliant, but we happen to be way ahead of the curve. And at that point in time, I saw a movie that many of us have seen, and that's Twister. And in Twister, if you remember, there was a 55-gallon drum full of round balls that in fact were data collection devices. And the theory was, put them in the path of a tornado, tornado takes them up, the collection devices report and communicate on their activity. We all know more about tornadoes at that point. We reduce risk and perhaps change the lives of people for the positive. And I thought, isn't that really what we're doing? We're putting all of these containers into a state of constant movement. Why don't we turn them into a Dorothy? Well, today we have a little over 20 million containers moving throughout North America, including Canada and Mexico, and we're doing business in 31 other countries. And that's really, at the simplest terms, that's what we've done. We've, if you will, put a 55-gallon container full of Dorothy types of data collection devices in the path of a tornado. That tornado is supply chain. And because we're monitoring 20 million different containers moving around, we know a lot. And we're moving from that now inside the plant. We're tracking parts, we track cars, we track trucks, all with one common goal. And that is to provide a couple of things, really. We want to identify what's there, we want to locate it, and then we want to follow those transactions. So Don, I guess that's kind of the summary of who I am and what was the kickoff energy behind Surgeir.
And your website?
The website is in transformation, and although it's I believe keenly able to kind of translate what we do to the clients, the transition for me is incredibly important. We're now doing things like helping clients start to use our website to help adjust what their considerations are for a business case. Supply chain and using IoT or web-based data collection is still in its infancy. Not many people understand what the potential ROI is, or better yet, even how to deploy. So our website is transitioning to provide those answers, but it's also transitioning to become a portal where our clients will use it to determine ongoing value. So if you're one of our clients, you can go through the portal and you can look at how much money you saved that particular month by using IoT in your supply chain to reduce costs, whether it's in logistics, warehouse, reduction of manpower for unnecessary work, all those kinds of things. But we're also now starting to measure, according to EPA formulas, what the reduction in carbon footprinting is by removing waste out of the stream. So that website although it's a great introduction to what we do, it's having more and more implications on value for the future.
Spell it out. Say what the name is.
So those areas are, have I purchased much too much as far as reusable containers? Am I using them appropriately? Do I throw them away when I'm done, or do I move them to if you will, a secondary use? All of those things that supply chain people really understand are now being presented to them in a way where they can start to see things like, am I getting optimized loads on my trucks? Am I turning too quickly, too slowly? Are my suppliers hoarding or maintaining our assets too long so that I'm wasting money throughout my supply chain? And we're talking, Don, we're talking about a problem that's significant enough that in North America, just relative to supply chain, in the automotive industry, it's $3.4 billion of waste. And so we're attacking that problem. It's logistics, it's manpower, it's proper use of assets. And that becomes even more critical, as you know, in a JIT environment. So, you know, if you read your book and you start talking about the Janus principle, now that's relative to how to meet the needs of a marketplace in small business. Well, think about supply chain. Most small businesses don't really have the necessary expertise in supply chain to be able to design, to be able to audit, right? Or for that matter, judge effectiveness and optimization, let alone return on investment. All of that expertise is resident in the large enterprise. It is not normally resident in small companies. So really what we want to do with our website is to promote what you've written in the past, which is we need to find a bridge to deliver a successful project and, if you will, an ongoing supply chain expertise to small companies. And so our website is transitioning to do that.
Funny you should mention that. In today's one of today's papers that I read, a toy shop is going out of business because they can't figure out how to get their enough toys and things in for the Christmas season, and they just decided to close up. Is that what you're trying to address?
I am, and we both know that small businesses are the lifeblood of North America today, and certainly the US economy. But when it comes to supply chain, that is not a competency that they have much depth in. So our ambition is no different than yours was at the time relative to market reach when you wrote the Janus principle, and it still holds true today. What we have to do is we have to reach out to that small enterprise and provide them through technology the depth of expertise that the big guys have. And so that you'll start to see on a pretty consistent basis that translation of our objective into our website. And our ambition, Don, is just like yours. We really want to bring that small business across the goal line too. And they don't have the big players like the big guys have. So we're going to promote technology to help.
Well, God knows we need it. But let's talk about where we are today. Many people are scared to death. They hear about the West Coast being jammed, ships outside. Are we not going to get the toys our kids want for Christmas, or are we, and will we pay a price for it, a premium for it?
Well, unfortunately, my answer is not very uplifting and positive. Currently, and I was just checking on some of the numbers the other day, there were roughly 103 ships parked off of Long Beach. Before the mess that we're in uh, grabbed hold of us, it was typically maybe 2 to 3. So now we have a sense of how big this problem is, right? And and when you start to think about supply chain and what supply chain practitioners do on a daily basis, maybe it starts to make a lot more sense on why this isn't going to be solved quickly. And that is, for me, supply chain is a dance. And it takes a lot of work between partners to make sure that their steps are in unison, that they look good on, if you will, and are effective. And that dance is rehearsed and worked on day after day after day. And that's the supply chain. The dance is between business partners. Whether you're a buyer or a supplier, you are constantly in that dance to make sure that the product is where you need it at the right time, the right quantity. And that dance has been perfected to the point where in North America, our supply chain isn't just a dance, it's choreography. If you will, it's whether you're thinking about Thriller in the 80s or whether you're going to take your children to see the ballet over Christmas, you fully understand choreography. People are moving in unison, and it is a work of art. Well, that's true with supply chain as well. So we had several things that now have interrupted not only the choreography, but the dance. And the question is, how do we get that back? And how quickly can we do it? And we even have, unfortunately, engaged in inserting unnatural problems and challenges such as government policy. Um, and that's really making it quite difficult. Instead of what I might suggest, which is a coming together of participants that might show us the way, we can't just say something as simple as, well, we'll keep the port open 24 hours a day. Well, first of all, the unions are not going to do that. I think currently they're on a Monday through Thursday basis. That's a pretty difficult thing to do relative to manpower. You just, that's not sustainable. But it's a much bigger problem than that. The problem is, well, if I work 24 hours a day, I offload more ships. What next? Well, we put them in warehouses, then we put them on trains, we put them on trucks. Well, the warehouses, quite frankly, and if you see overhead photos of the docks in Long Beach and LA and up and down our coasts, you'll see that there's nowhere to put the offloaded cargo containers. So really the question is, how do we get everyone to begin dancing together as effectively as we can? And then choreography is the answer over time. We're really not doing that, Don. We're really attacking one single point in the problem, and it's going to last, unfortunately, for a while. I was in a conversation just yesterday with an incredibly large multinational supplier to the automotive industry, and much of what they're thinking about in a financial, or if you will, economic standpoint is we believe that there will still be some impact going into the end of next year, 2022, if not drifting into 2023. So that's a long answer to your short question. Unfortunately, I think that most of everyone's Christmas presents are sitting off the ports, getting them from the ships to the dock, to transportation, to the shelves in time for Christmas is, I would call that legitimately nearly impossible, if not very improbable. Um, and that's what we're going to have to live with. But it's actually testing not only the small business. And I very often think of the small business because, again, they're the ones that are critically important in our economy, but they're the ones that are least able to deal with this problem. You had just mentioned a toy store that couldn't define whether or not they could supply Christmas presents and therefore decided to close. Well, what was behind that decision, right? Well, first of all, they had no idea where the toy order was. Is it on a boat? Is it in a cargo container and sitting at port? Where is it? And that's one of the primary challenges is give us information so that we can all make decisions. Now, that is typically Serger's role in life, right? As I said before, we identify things, we locate them, and then we tell you about the transactions they've been through, whether or not they're on the boat, whether they're on the port dock, whether they're in transit. That's kind of our job in life. But we serve companies like Toyota, Honda, Mazda, very large suppliers. The small company today doesn't have access to that data. And they are well behind then the curve of being able to make valid business decisions. Unfortunately, I think that the decision that your toy company made was probably a good one. You know, we're well behind the 8 ball here. I don't think that they're going to see their toys for Christmas.
Well, let's back up a minute, Bill. It seems to me you have the East Coast ports, which we're here in New Jersey right now. We're in Vermont, but they're not working 24 hours a day. They're not over. Why not reroute ships here?
Well, that's a great question. And the answer, again, is all about choreography. Unfortunately, you know, there are very smart people in supply chain out there today, and they've already started moving container ships to the East Coast, right? They've tried to move them up to Oregon. They're already looking for secondary ports so that they can solve the problem. Here's the issue. The secondary ports are not ready to offload or receive that much material coming in, let alone have all of the other dancers in choreography. All of the train cars necessary to move them are not in place. The trucks are not in place. And it would be a long time to rebuild, if you will, port capacity and be able to go through the entire distribution cycle. That is a brilliant strategy, but a longer term strategy.
Does it indicate also that maybe Los Angeles and Long Beach are going to face competition from other ports? People realize they can't rely on those two ports.
I hope that's the case. One of the one of the realities that we're dealing with, as I had said before, is we're all challenged with learning a new dance, and a lot of things have brought this about. Whether it's the effects of COVID, we're all a lot of us had been working from home for a long time, and so something as simple as painting the room, getting a new couch, things that may not have been on our radar screen before became obvious, and it changed buying patterns. Then we infused a lot of money into our economy. People had a lot more discretionary income come into the household. They decided to start gardening, buying new chairs, a new table, whatever it might be, which now has changed that choreography to include a tune, if you will, a buying pattern that had never been played before, and people are starting to get to be a jumbled mess. Then you start overlaying to that the ongoing requirements that are there, and you start having a shortage of sea containers, and it goes a little bit on and on and on. And every problem starts to make then the problem geometrically more difficult to solve, not just in linear fashion. So that's why we can't undo this. My suggestion, Don, is kind of simple. First of all, I think we all are aware by now that Long Beach and the state of California doesn't want owner-operator transportation companies coming into port and removing sea containers. Okay, but that's a large number of opportunities to remove product from the port, and yet we're ignoring them, even during a time where, by last count, we were something like 80,000 drivers behind what we really need to support the transportation industry in the United States. So my first thought would simply be this: let's not put any policy challenges between companies and their suppliers. We need as few challenges to get over as possible. And the other piece I had mentioned before, Don, but it's really pretty simple. This isn't a dance. This is choreography. You need the ports. You need the people that are moving containers. You need the railroads, the transportation companies, if you will, the truckers, all sitting at a table trying to figure out how to work in unison optimally. And we should be getting to that real soon, or we're going to see this drag into next Christmas.
Yeah. Well, Bill, we only have a couple of minutes left. What else would you like to leave our audience with today?
Well, unfortunately, I have some advice as to do your shopping early. I think we're going to have a lot of members in our family that we would like to have Christmas presents for that we may not be able to take care of unless we get to it right away. I would also ask that we all think simplistically again, in that we need some patience right now. And this is a problem that is going to touch all of us. We really can't hoard toilet paper and get through this together. We need to be patient. We need to act as the country that I know that we are. Hopefully, technology folks, much like us, can bring supply chain skills to small companies so that they can remain viable as quickly as possible. But at the end of the day, it's really all about people. And that means that we have to understand what we're going to be dealing with. Okay, we know that we're not going to have all the products we would like. We have to understand that we're all in this together. And that means that we smile when we can't smile, and we have patience when I know on a personal level, I know my granddaughter wants Barbie dolls this year and clothes and toys that go along with that. And I know in my heart that there's probably things she'd like to have that I'm not going to be able to take care of. So I think we have to approach it in the same fashion, if you will, that the English did during the early days of World War II. We know what we're up against, and the only way we're going to, if you will, be victorious in this is if we're together. And we should not put a lesser value on that than it deserves, because I think we're all going to find that to be critically important as we work our way through this.
Well, that's my sentiments. So what if we get less present? Have we forgotten what Christmas is really about? Uh,
There is some of that, isn't there?
on that note, let us say thank you for very informative time together. Thank you, Bill.
My absolute pleasure, Don. Thanks for inviting me.
Have a great day and a good holiday.
Merry Christmas.